It's that time again for another one of these amazing episodes of ColumbusBlack.com's Wellness Wednesday, but this is a special edition. Normally, we do a lunch and learn, as you all know, but today we're doing a special edition. It's an evening session versus a lunch and learn. You can consider this a dinner and learn because we're going to be talking about two really critical and important topics today. And I can't wait to actually get into this. So, in a second, you all are going to be able to see my special guest that I have here with me. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring him on screen right now, and you all can see Dontavius Jarrells on the screen with us today. We appreciate you as our state representative actually being here with us today to talk about two critical things. One is going to be the protest or anti-protest ban, as well as critical race theory.
Yeah.
Two really important subjects relevant to us, especially not just in our state, but around the entire country. Before we jump into some of these details, everybody, I want to make sure for those that don't know who we are, we're ColumbusBlack.com. We've been around for 16 years, and we're excited about that. And we've evolved into the primary online resource connecting the Black community in Central Ohio to commerce and to culture. And when we do this, we connect people to commerce, which is businesses, and we highlight small Black businesses and business owners to really help generate capital for them. But we also connect our community to larger corporations in Central Ohio as well through our recruiting services. Now, in addition to that is culture. The culture piece is exactly what we're talking about now. Anything tied to us and our community culturally, right? That's what we talk about, whether it's events and activities or the well-being, the mental well-being, the physical and the spiritual well-being of our community. We hit all of those. So topics like this are prime for who we are and what we do to make sure our community is informed. Now, today's episode is in conjunction with Amplify Ohio, which is a collaborative where we're focused on amplifying issues and topics, especially those tied to legislation, breaking those down so we understand what it is and what it means, and then giving you the voice that you need to understand how you can handle addressing any of those legislative issues as well. So we feel like an informed community begins to be a powerful community as well. And we want to make sure that you all have the information needed. So that's the reason why I'm excited that we have our special guest here with us today to address these two issues so we can learn a little bit more. We can understand what's going on. You all will be able to ask questions, right? So the chat lines will be open. We're on YouTube Live and on Facebook. So you'll have the opportunity. If you have a question, I'll be monitoring them. We'll drop those questions in and we'll do our best to make sure you get an answer today. All right. If you don't get an answer today, we'll get you an answer and we'll drop it in the chat as a follow-up as well. So with that being said, Representative Jarrells, excited to have you, humbled to have you. Appreciate you spending the time with us
Absolutely.
today. And I'll let you go. And would you mind introducing yourself to our audience so they know who you are? And then we'll go from there into some of these discussion points.
Well, first and foremost, Kevin, I want to say thank you to Columbus Black and Amplify Action for putting on this. I think it's an important conversation. It's one that I believe I try to have all the time, even if within my own circle. And so I'm glad to be in your circle talking about the importance of individuals understanding what's happening in the State House. For those of you who don't know, my name is Dontavius Jarrells. I'm the state representative for the 25th House District. I call the historic 25th. I am proud to represent the northeast part of Columbus. And so if you think about neighborhoods, it's Milo Grogan, it's North-South Linden, it's McCutcheon, it's Strawberry Farms, it's part of all of Easton. I also represent all of Mifflin Township, a part of Clinton Township, and even get into a little bit of Gahanna, just a little bit. And so I'm a freshman legislator. I am also the youngest elected official here in Central Ohio, so I'm excited about that. I feel like I won't have that title for long, though, but it feels good to have it right now. But most importantly, I represent you. I have over 130,000 people that make up my district, and every single day I wake up thinking about how can I support, uplift, empower the voices of my constituents so that we can build laws and policies that best meet you where you are. And so that's the beauty of, I think, these conversations, is making sure you understand all the things that are happening in State House, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how your voice can be a part of the process at every step of the way. And so I'm happy to be on. I'm happy to be talking about these two critically important issues that are permeating our state house right now, and looking forward to some of the questions you all ask.
Outstanding, outstanding, outstanding. So thank you once again, and what an amazing introduction. And yeah, it's great that you are the youngest, and obviously that's a good sign. If somebody else younger than you will eventually be in that
Right,
spot as well. Good
right.
stuff. So let's talk about the first bill, right?
Yeah.
That's on the table right now, and that's in regards to the anti-protest ban, right?
That's
So
House Bill
can
22.
House Bill 22, right?
Mhm.
Would you mind telling and explaining to us what is this bill about? So people who don't know what HB 22 is, let's understand that tonight.
So yeah, so there are a number of bills, and I want to preface this with a statement. You can find all these bills if you go to ohiohouse.gov. There is a search bar. It says search bills. You click on it, and literally you could type in the bill number, and it will tell you or show you the bill, the executive summary of the bill, and also the analysis of the bill. And so I always want to say that first before I start talking about bills, because some people don't even know where to go to follow along, if even if they want to do some research at at home to figure out where the bill is in the process. And so House Bill 22 was passed by the Ohio House. I voted no on the bill, obviously, and it's sponsored by Representatives LaRay and Representatives Wilkin. And what it does is expands the obstruction of justice language. And so when a officer is giving a order, and you for one reason or another do not follow said order, that is obstruction of justice. And what they've done is they have elevated that definition to capture new elements that, for example, filming a police officer, and the officer tells you
Whoa.
to step back, right? Not the filming part, but if the officer tells you to step back and you don't listen, that's obstruction of justice to their eyes. Or when you are in, anytime an officer tells you to do something and you feel like you are in your rights, and you disregard that order, that is obstruction of justice based upon this elevated definition. And so there's a number of the other issue with this particular definition is that it's not specific. It is really up to the officer as to whether or not you have did not follow a lawful order from them. And so, when we think about bias that we know permeates all people, but particularly our law enforcement community, we have to make sure that, we're not creating gray areas where this definition can very well mean someone's livelihood is at stake. And so, House Bill 22 passed out of the House. It's currently in the Senate. It has not been assigned a committee yet in the Senate, but I implore you that once it gets a committee signed, it gets signed over to a committee in the Senate, it's important that your voices are heard in this process. The other thing that was very unique about this particular bill is that they had about over 100 people come out in opposition of this bill during the committee process, and only approximately nine, uh, entities or individuals came out in support of the bill. And you would think, when you think about moving bills through the process, 100 people, 100 organizations coming out against a bill like this, you would hope that it would give pause to say we need to think back or think about how this bill really is going to impact neighborhoods and communities, particularly neighborhoods and communities that see a lot of issues related to their community police relations. But unfortunately, the committee decided to pass this bill out of committee, and then it got pushed over to the floor, and it got pushed for a vote. And so it tells you that, it's important to have your voices heard in the process, but it's even more important to make sure that you're contacting Republicans and Democrats to say that bills like these do not help our communities move forward. And in fact, especially with all of the negative or opposition this bill had, I think it's best that we have a pause to really get to the issue, to get to the meat of why this bill is not good for communities. And so that's one of the bills. The other three bills are still making their way through the process. You have House Bill 109, which essentially increases penalties for assault, vandalism, and riot offenses to peace officers, and it allows peace officers to bring civil suits against those individuals, which is something new. You have Senate Bill 15, which basically it does the same thing, but it increases the penalties for assault in that bill. And then you have Senate Bill 41, which essentially is is similar to House Bill 109. Sometimes when you have bills that are in both chambers that are identical, you'd have, one bill in the Senate that's has similar language to the other in the House, and those are so some of these bills may overlap in some of the things that they do, but there are four bills that are making their way through the House, all with the purpose of restricting and or limiting various aspects of of protesting, in our communities. And so it's something that we have to look out for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for breaking that down so we could understand what the four bills are that's actually on the table at this point in time. What I would like to go back though is to help us understand, because people who are really engaged into what's going on have an idea of what this is about and how we even got here. But would you mind taking us back a little bit before I go to where I normally would be? It was like, okay, what do we need to do about this, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to get there. But if in your perspective, right, or from your wisdom, how did we get to a point where these bills are even on the table?
Yeah.
Because some of these are significant
Absolutely.
changes to what we
Yeah.
can and can't do.
It is. And I'll tell you what, one of the George Floyd's death really ignited the country.
Hmm.
And, we saw a number of protests happen here in the State House. And not just in the State House, but in the City Hall, but up
Yep.
down Mount Vernon, everywhere, like
Hmm.
across this region, we saw protests. And there were a number of, I think when you look at the number, there are like across the nation, only 18% of any of those protests turned violent. Every
Hmm.
other protest was peaceful. And
Right.
so, the 18% is what they're using as a mechanism to say we need to beefing up our protest laws. But when you're, for example, one of the things, and this was Representative Jeff Crossman, and we can roll the tape from one of our earlier sessions where in the House we were actually debating this bill. He put out an amendment, and the amendment was to exclude from this obstruction of justice language individuals who are filming or doing things that are in the lens of a good Samaritan, right? And so when there are issues or when there's conflict between the police and the community, you have people who come in who say, I'm here to, make sure you get home and make sure our individuals who are protesting get home. And the amendment was to just essentially say that, individuals who are acting in good faith as a good Samaritan should not be, penalized through this
Hmm.
obstruction and justice language.
Hmm.
And that
Okay.
amendment was tabled, meaning that it
Wow.
was no longer a part of the discussion for this bill. And so you think about this, like if this was good intention, that we were really thinking about the most violent individuals, we should be uplifting then the very people who are trying to keep the peace, especially during a protest, right? We know that this particular language is harmful for all people involved. And we want to make sure we're safeguarding the people who are doing good in our communities. And for one reason or another, my Republican colleagues decided not to do that, not to move forward with that amendment. And it shows you that it's not about the the individuals who are out there rioting. This is about how do we limit the movement when there are issues that happen in our communities. And that's part of the problem, is that it was precipitated by the George Floyd death. And from there, they wanted to stump or trump some of the energy that was happening in our communities when we see injustice happen. And so, these bills are all under this guise that there is this, a riot issue, or we want to stop riots from occurring. But when good legislation gets tabled, it shows that that narrative simply is not true. And there's other reasons why they're pushing this legislation forward, which ultimately is stopping individuals' freedom of speech and being able to, stand up for things that they believe in.
Okay. So you just segued into what I was going to ask, which is what's at risk with these bills, right? So what's at risk?
A lot. I mean, I think when you, as an individual who, when we think about what happened with George Floyd, it was the videotape that led to the prosecution of the officer, Derek Chauvin. And when you are pushing individuals further and further back in fear of being arrested themselves, the likelihood of those tapes being used as evidence becomes less and less likely, or less and less reliable.
Right.
And so I think it's, the biggest fear is that when something malicious happens to an individual, with whether it is, involving a police officer, unfortunately, we won't have the evidence to support, what's happening or what happened in that situation. And we likely could end up with a situation where that same situation ends up not being prosecuted. That's the most egregious of, the realities. I also believe that it's when people are fearful of going to prison or going to jail, folks don't come out, right? You keep your families at home. You don't want your loved one going out in fear of them being caught up in a system that's not designed for them, right? And I think that's a family discussion now, right? Because as these bills move through, and if they become law, because we don't know, they're still making their way through the process, we know that it's going to become even more of a dangerous environment that could put your family in. And so the question then becomes whether or not you should protest at all, or use your freedom of speech at all. And I think that that's another angle. Almost like you want to, these bills aren't helping individuals, use their voice. They're curtailing it. They're trying to restrict that from happening. And so, I think on both fronts, whether it's the evidentiary piece, or it's the piece of, just being out there and wanting to use your voice and being fearful of you getting caught up in the legal system, both sides end up impacting neighborhoods and communities who really need and see that advocacy as a medium for change. And so that's what I would say.
Wow. That's really heavy. And I really want everyone to understand what's on the table. We did just have a question to recap the bills being discussed this evening. So for those of you that are just joining us today, I have Representative Dontavius Jarrells with us today, and we're working through two key bills right now. One is the anti-protest ban bill, and then the other one is critical race theory.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking about that bill shortly. But what he's been doing is breaking down for us what is the bill itself, as well as what does this mean, right? What are the implications of this bill going through, if it does go through the Senate as well and becomes law, and what that would do to some of our rights, right? So, and we talked about, like, how do we even get here? Because I think understanding the foundation and the background is critically important. So thank you for doing all of that for us. Now, the question that I have for you, and this is always the big one, right, is what can we do, right? You mentioned, right, regardless, guess what? Democrat, Republican, I don't care. You need to reach out to your representatives and your senators. And a lot of people hear that sometimes they don't know what to do. Where are the numbers? Who do I call? What do I say? Right? So what do we need to do for those that, because you already said a lot of people came out against this,
right,
and it still went through the committee, right? So the question is now, what can everyday people do that recognize that they don't want their rights to be taken away,
right,
and to a point of might not even be able to pull out, your camera phone
Right.
if you see something wrong going on. And before you answer that question, I want people to understand this, because we talk about it all the time. A lot of people say, oh my God, there's so much going on. And then you'll hear people say, there's always been a lot of this stuff going on. It's just now you can see it, right? Because it's being recorded and it's being shared.
Right.
Now, if that right is taken away to do that, because somebody says, put that phone down, stop recording, and you have to do it, or you're obstructing justice and going to jail, that changes the whole landscape, right?
It does.
So this is heavy. This is a big one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't urge enough the fact that, we need people's voices in the State House. And I do want to appreciate, now I don't sit on the committee that moved these bills through, the Criminal Justice Committee. But I'll tell you that the support that we received as people learned about House Bill 22 and the number of the other bills has been incredible. And we need to continue that movement, right? As this bill now moves over to the Senate, we need to pack out the Senate, wherever it goes, whether it's the judiciary, wherever this bill lands, we need to make sure that we're showing out in force and really sharing our personal realities that these bills are going to have on you, on your families, and on your communities. I also think it's equally important that even if you can't make it to the State House, right? I get our committees are during the business day. People are working 2-3 jobs, which is one of the reasons why I'm pushing $15 minimum wage. We know that, you may not have the time to spend hours at the State House waiting for your turn to speak. So I always urge folks to write to their legislators, write testimony. I'm happy to send out a sample written testimony looks like, and so that people can use and amplify and use their voice and put their narrative in and then submit it to the committee. It'll be beautiful to have hundreds of different written testimony for this particular bill, or any bill for that matter that you believe is going to impact you negatively or your community negatively. I also think it's important that you call the governor, right? The governor has veto powers on any bill, and so if it hits his desk, he doesn't believe that is something that we should have in our state, he can veto it. So calling the governor, calling the committee members that sit on the committee, not just Democrats but also Republicans as well, to make sure that your voice is heard in that process. And then I think the biggest thing of all is just galvanizing our community. And I use stand your ground as an example. Most individuals didn't know what stand your ground was until it already passed and signed into law, right? And then we were getting ready for it, and it was like, what you mean we passed this bill, right? This is a law now. So the earlier we are to engage our communities to educate that these bills are moving through, the bigger the coalition can be to show that these bills would have a negative impact on our communities. And so those are the ways in which I would subscribe, ask people to help us as we are navigating these spaces. Because your voice is the most powerful vehicle to impacting change in the legislature. Folks, lobbyists come in, advocacy folks come in. Those are all great people. That's their job. When you as a person take the time to write a letter or to write a statement on why this bill is going to impact your family, or write a personal perspective and a personal experience on how this would impact you, it matters, and it can sway people. And so don't ever underestimate the power of your voice in this moment.
Well, I'll tell you, you keep jumping ahead and answering the questions before I can ask them. So I literally was going to ask you this question and say, because you talk about packing the house, you talk about writing these letters, making these calls, and I was going to ask, because I know a lot of people believe that it doesn't help.
It does.
And I was going to ask you, does it matter, man? Does it matter that people reach out, write those letters, make those calls, or pack out the house?
It does, because I tell you, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen often. And so there will be times when we're sitting in committee And again, it's the lobbyists, it's the advocacy organizations that's there, and we're in and out of committee, right? And
Okay.
especially during COVID, right? As we navigate
Mm.
the COVID environment, it's been simple, right? We get through 4 or 5 bills in one sitting and be done.
Wow.
I'll tell you, like, it is so important that your voices are heard. And when you show up, so I'll give you another example. When we had a bill that was working its way through health committee,
Yeah.
and I don't sit on health committee, but I was there from House Bill 281, which we did pass the House with my bill, changing some of the derogatory language in the Ohio Revised Code. After my bill was done, there was a bill that was to change COVID business practices. So a business could not restrict access to individuals who were unvaccinated. Right? There's a whole bill moving through the GA related to that.
Right. Right.
And I'll tell you, folks who felt strongly about staying unvaccinated packed the house. It was hundreds of people standing in the committee, standing room, and out in the hallway waiting to be seated, right?
Wow.
That has
Powerful.
power. That's
Yep.
power. And so we
Okay.
can mobilize the same way around bills like House Bill 22 or bills like Senate Bill 16 or bills like
Mm.
House Bill 109, right? We
Mhm.
can show and force that we truly believe that these bills are moving us in the wrong direction and we can be
Okay.
better and we can do better. And so I'll tell you, the other side is doing it. They're packing it out,
Hmm.
bringing busloads of people
Wow.
to show up and
Okay.
testify. We need to do the same as a community as well.
Heavy. All right. Listen, y'all. So one of the things we always talk about is the call to action, right? It's always about, okay, now what? What do you do? Whether it's supporting a business or in this case, supporting or not supporting a bill, right? That is going to impact you and your livelihood. So in this case, he has shared what we need to do, right? So you, depending on where you stand, is up to you, right? But you understand what's on the table. So write the letter, right? Make the call and show up.
Show
Now,
up.
so I'm gonna ask you, I'm gonna ask you to help us out here, right?
Mhm.
So if I'm going to write a letter, you said that you would help us with the template
We can send
at
something to
Columbus.
you.
Yep. So here's what we're gonna do. He's gonna get me the template. We're gonna send an email blast out, right? So everybody who's on our email list, and the way you do that is you go to columbusblack.com, it'll pop up, or you see it on the right side. Sign up for our email, you'll get that. We're also going to share it on social media, right? So we'll share that template so people can see this is what you can do. This is how it should be done, right? Now, what about the phone call? So who do we call, right? Like, how do we know who to call?
Yeah, so when you go to ohiohouse.gov
Mm-hmm. Right.
and you go to the search bills tab, is probably like the fourth tab up at the top. And you you write in the bill. So let's say you use House Bill 22. Once you click on House Bill 22, it shares with you who's all the co-sponsors of the bill, who are the lead sponsors of the bill. It shows you the executive summary of the bill
Mm.
language, and it also shows you the committee where the bill is going or has gone. Right. So in
Okay.
this case, the House Bill 22 went into Criminal Justice Committee and now is passed the House and it's being referred into the Senate. We don't have a confirmation yet as to what committee is going to, but once it does receive a committee, then every single person who sits on that committee you can see. And when you click on their name, you see their profile. And on the side of their profile, they have all their contact information. I would urge you to contact them, call them, email them, make sure that your voices are heard. So everything is in ohiohouse.gov. And I wish I could share my screen. I could kind of show you, but it'll be really. I think that's the one-stop shop to not only see the bill, not only track the bill to see where it's moving through the process, but also learn more about who is driving the bill, who supports the bill, those bills, and how to get their contact information. All of that is on ohiohouse.gov.
Well, there's no time better than the present, right? So what I'll do is I'm going to actually share screen right now because I want to make sure we can educate our community. So this is the page you're talking about right here.
That is true.
Okay.
So you click on legislation.
Here we go. All right, so I'm gonna click on legislation.
Type in the key HB 22, and then press search. Yep. Click on the bill, and it shows. So if you see here, it shows it was introduced in the House, it's in the House committee, reported by committee, passed out the House, and now it's introduced in the Senate. And so that's essentially, if you ever want to know how a bill becomes a law, this is the process. This is the process. And it shows you on the left-hand side who's sponsored the bill. But if you keep going down, it shows you all the co-sponsors. Now, if you keep going back up, it shows you fiscal note. It shows you the current version of the bill. It shows you the bill analysis. And then you look at committees. See, it's in the House Criminal Justice Committee. So click on that. So when you click on the House Criminal Justice Committee, for example, it shows every individual who is on the committee. So let's click on one of DJ Sweargen, for example. So when you click on him, it has his profile and with all of his contact information. Keep going down, keep going down. And so that's all his contact information right there.
Right there.
With 614-644-6011. And so that's just essentially one bill that you can do and kind of do a deep dive analysis of how the bill's moving through the process, who is supporting said bill, where the bill is in the committee process, and also who to contact on those committees.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. So listen, this is what this was all about. I'm going to tell you right now, because I personally have not gone into the website and looked at the status of a bill and how it's actually going through the process. So I know that there's a lot of other people who are learning just like I'm learning. And I appreciate you educating us so we can do a better job. And that's what this was all about, being informed and now understanding how we can take action, right? So I mentioned earlier to everybody, this particular episode is a conjunction with Amplify Ohio, which is a collaboration, right, between Black Girl and CLE, Buckeye Flame, and ColumbusBlack.com. And our goal is to educate and inform our communities on issues just like this, have it broken down, but then make sure you all understand how you can use your voice and make some action out of what you have the ability to do. So outstanding job. Now, before we switch, because we're about to jump onto this critical race theory bill in a second, is there, and we already know it's about to be on. I know we got some people online, so it's going to be interesting. But is there anything else in regards to House Bill 22 or the other three that's associated with the anti-protest bill that you want to share before we wrap up this segment?
You know, only thing I'll say, and I'll say it also with the critical race theory bills as well, is that your voice is your power. And I think it's mightily important that you use your voice in this moment, especially as these bills are making their way through the House and the Senate. I can't stress it enough. We need to show up. We need to show out. We need your support. Obviously, there are people who are going to vote no on these bills because they are not the right. It's not the right direction for Ohio. But we need help. And you know, and on the other side, when they have a bill that they love, that they want to push through, they show up. And we want to make sure that we do the same for bills that aren't going to be right for our communities. And so I'm urging you, make sure you go to ohiohouse.gov, check out all the bills. I'll repeat them: House Bill 22, House Bill 109, Senate Bill 16, Senate Bill 41. Those are the four bills that are making their way through the GA. That's all committed to tampering or stopping protests in one way or another. And so it's mightily important to make sure that your voice is heard in the process.
Outstanding. And I started doing this, for those that don't know, when I start doing this, that means gems are being dropped, and he dropped some gems, right? So y'all got to make sure you execute that power that y'all have, all right? Don't stand still and be on the sidelines and then later on say, how did it happen, right? We're getting a heads up right now. And there's a question that just dropped in that says, is this bill being fast-tracked?
Yes.
The answer is yes. Okay. Now, the only other question that I have tied to this particular bill is we talked about people showing up. So we talked about the letters and we're going to give them a draft. We talked about the phone calls. You showed us exactly how to get the numbers and the contact to reach out. When it comes to showing up, you mentioned that sometimes this is during the day. How do we know and find out? Is it on the same websites for the days and times where we should show up to participate in this process?
So that's a great question, Kevin. I appreciate you asking. So every single committee has a ranking member and a chair. The ranking member is, I'm in the minority as the party is Democrats. And so each committee has a ranking member. In this case, Representative David Leland, who's also in our delegation for Franklin County. He is the ranking member for the House Criminal Justice Committee. I would email him and his aide to say, hey, I'm really interested in, so if it was still in the House, you would email the ranking member in the House and say you're interested in speaking or testifying on the bill. In the Senate, you'll have to get the ranking member on that committee and do the same thing, and say, hey, I would like to be informed on how this bill is moving and when it's time for opponent testimony. And you got to be very specific, because proponent testimony is for the bill and opponent testimony is against the bill. In this case, for House Bill 22, you'll be an opponent for the bill. Interested parties is folks who are neutral, right? And I know most of y'all on this chat probably aren't neutral. And so it is important that you specify that you want to speak as an opponent for the bill. And then typically what happens is the ranking member's office will respond to you with a email listing out, you have to actually fill out a form in order to make sure that your name is properly recorded as a person who's testifying. And they will also ask that you submit your testimony 24 hours in advance prior to the day when the testimony is happening. And so it's really, really important to remember that. Typically, I have not seen him necessarily say no to anybody. It's the People's House. We typically are very open, but the reality is we want to make sure that testimony is 24 hours in the committee, or to the committee chair 24 hours in advance, so that we can make sure it's journaled and they know that you're coming in order to give that testimony. So that's how I would offer just a recommendation to folks who are interested in testifying.
Let me tell you, he is dropping powerful gems, because the thing is, this just doesn't apply to these bills. It's every one of them. This is how we can become engaged and involved and take action and create accountability, right? And speak your voice. At least you voice your opinion. You have the opportunity to say, I spoke up about this. And he's walking through the blueprint of how we do that, okay? I can't thank you enough for doing that, because anybody can follow those steps. So do me one last, we did have the question again. So the 4 bills, once again, are House Bill 22.
Yep, it's House Bill 22. It's House Bill 109. Yep. It's Senate Bill 16, and it's Senate Bill 41. Those are the 4 bills.
All right. And I just dropped that in the chat as well, so everybody will know what those 4 are. All right, let's switch gears, because that one went a little bit longer than I thought, but it's really, really good. So now, guess what, y'all? Critical race theory. All right. So can you do the exact same thing? Can you explain to us what this bill is about? And then we'll go from there to the next question.
So, I had to look up, I'll be real honest with folks, because they don't teach critical race theory in high school or in middle school or in elementary school. I had to look it up, right, to make sure I had the appropriate definition for folks. So I'm going to read it to you and then correlate it to where we are with these 2 bills.
Yes.
These 2 bills are House Bill 322 and House Bill 327. And so in a nutshell, critical race theory, as defined, is essentially a legal framework where we are able to critically examine U.S. law as it intersects with the issues of race and the U.S. and challenges the mainstream American perspective related to just how race permeates our reality. And so this is not taught in high school. This is this is something that is taught at a law level, law school level, maybe even a master's degree. Like this is not something that our children are taught. What our children are taught are current events like the death of George Floyd, maybe
Mhm.
redlining, talking about the civil rights era and what happened to people beyond Martin Luther King, right?
Mhm.
It may talk about the bus boycott. We talk about, right there are, the history of the struggles of America are typically taught in schools. And House Bill 322, which is being led by Representative Don Jones, and is in the House State and Local Committee, is going to essentially restrict certain current events and certain concepts regarding race and sex being taught in public schools. It requires that no state agency, school district shall require a teacher of history, civics, or government to discuss current events or widely debated and currently controversial issues of public
Mhm.
policy and social affairs. It
Mm.
essentially it restricts any individual from feeling discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any form of psychological distress on account of individual's race or sex. And there's a number of various principles that this particular bill is led by that essentially says, meritocracy isn't real. The advent realities of slavery was not the true founding of the United States. I mean, like, it is essentially what I believe is watering down the truth of what's happening and what has happened in our American history. And so current like events like, for example, redlining would not be discussed based upon the current fabrics of this bill and how this bill's drafted. Um, we couldn't talk about, you know, the water crisis that are maybe happening in our communities, particularly happening in Michigan. Um, Heck, they could even, kids wouldn't even be able to write about lead poisoning in their communities. We know that's a
Mm.
current issue and a current topic that could be controversial for some folks. Um, even issues related to, just some of the videos that we've seen on the killings related to
Mhm.
our law enforcement officers, like any of those controversial, because controversial is a pretty broad term, by the way. It
Wow.
could be anything, right? And so this, kind of watering down the realities that our young people are facing on a day-to-day basis is built into this bill, all under the
Mm.
guise of critical race theory. And critical race theory is not even defined. When you ask people what is critical race theory, most folks don't even know,
Right.
right? They tell you all types of stuff. You get probably 50
Right.
different answers. This bill has nothing to do with critical race theory, but it has everything to do with
Mm.
stopping conversations about race and about
Mm.
injustice, about events that are impacting many of those students that may sit in that classroom forever,
Yep.
reaching the forefront of the discussions in that room. And that's where I think we all need to be in terms of really having an honest conversation about what this bill is and what this bill is not. Um, it is definitely taking us in a direction where those issues that are really that are real and pertinent to people like myself and probably many of those students in that classroom will never be spoken about. And I just think it's a disservice to the truth for those students. So that's House Bill 322. House Bill 327 takes it a step further, and this is a bill that's being pushed by Representatives Diane Grindle and Sarah Fowler Alter, which essentially says everything that was said in 322. And if a school district says, you know what, we don't teach critical race theory, we teach the truth, we don't agree with these premises that are in 322, this bill, House Bill 327, says you can't you will not be able to receive any state funding for your school district
Mm.
if you do not agree or you decide to teach any of these perspectives in that school district. And so now there is a funding attachment to this conversation where if you teach the truth in schools, if you teach about current events in schools, if you teach about slavery and redlining, all the issues that we know, the injustices we've seen in our communities, we will not fund you as a school district. And so, so you can't just look at 322 as an isolated bill. You got to look at 322 and House Bill 327 as paired bills, because one is dealing with funding and the other one does not.
Okay, man, that was a lot, and that's heavy. And I gotta drop some of these because once again, you are breaking it down, and these gem drops are heavy. And this is so serious. So let's go back to we're gonna go through the same process a little bit, but we're gonna get to the end a little bit faster because you already told us how to do what we need to do from an accountability standpoint and engagement perspective. So we won't have to go through that as much. But how did we get here? Right. So these two bills changed a whole lot, right? And I know 2020 was a year, but walk us through so people understand, like, how are we even having these conversations right now?
Well, I think both subjects are born out of out of what happened in the last with Trump election, with George Floyd. I mean, and both of these topics are national topics, right?
That's right.
All across the country, you'll see legislatures that are controlled by Republicans pushing these topics forward. I think about what's happened in Tennessee. They pushed and passed a critical race theory legislation and it's signed into law, right? It's happening all across this country. And I can't speak on where it originated beyond simply saying that, and when we talk about racism as a public health crisis, and there's so many families, individuals who believe that is the truth, this is the counter.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about race. We're going to talk about the American ideals. What American ideals was founded on, on a number of injustices that so many of us, it's hard. We can name a lot of them, obviously we want freedom and truth and liberty and justice. But the reality is when you were at 1.3/5 of a human, right? When you did not have the right to vote, when they asked you to count jelly beans in a jar in order for you to be eligible to vote, those are injustices that we have to talk about. And these bills, both of them, would consider those realities, what's actually happened in our history, controversial and divisive. And so if you are, if you don't want us to talk about them, this is how you do it. This is how you restrict the truth from ever coming into our classrooms, by stopping teachers from actually teaching. And I don't know what you replace it with. Like, what we gonna say? Like, the redlining didn't happen. That that slavery was a moment. Like, what are we gonna say in our classroom to replace the realities that many of our young people are facing day in and day out? They're coming from homes where they may not even have water, or they may not even have lights, or they may be starving, right? Real realities precipitated by a system that many people don't feel is designed for them. And so what are we going to say in return to those families, to those students, that their truth is not real? That what they've seen with their own eyes is not real? I just think it's precipitated on the unfortunate reality that some people don't want to talk about these concepts, these realities. People just don't want to talk about it. But it is something that's moving nationally. Obviously, there's, from a political side, there's political gain to be had, emboldening communities to say that we shouldn't be talking about these issues. And I just think it's the wrong step for Ohio, and it's definitely the wrong step for many of our BIPOC communities across this nation.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, well, hey, thanks again for breaking that down and
Yeah.
helping us understand some of the foundation tied to how we ended up here as well. Now, here's the deal: is we actually have, and I believe they may be on the line. We may have representatives, right? Some students, high school students, as a part of the Nina Imani Leadership Institute and/or the Ubuntu Leadership Summer Leadership Institute as well that may be on the line. What I want to do is I want to offer them, if they are listening in, which I believe they are, so some comments earlier. If you have a question or you have a comment or thought, especially as our youth and a high school student, for instance, that may be impacted by these types of bills and or potential laws, if you have a question or comment, we would love to allow our youth to weigh in. So I'm gonna throw that out there as we keep going, and we'll see if they share anything. Anyone else that's watching, same thing for you. You have the ability. I just asked if you have any questions or thoughts to please share those with us as well as we move forward. Right. So as I think about the significance of, we always talk about money, right, and the impact of dollars. And if you want to make it, if you want to hurt them, they say hit them in their pockets, right? So when I listen to you describe the second bill and the lack of funding that these schools would receive if they decided to continue to address these very pertinent and relevant issues, that their funding would be removed. And this is, this is serious, right? Like, because the schools can't, right?
Yeah.
Like, you think about the power and the impact of that is the schools can't necessarily run without the funding in most cases, right? Unless they go to private funding, right? So that's what's at risk is now the dollars talk. Now, aren't the dollars that would create that funding taxpayer dollars?
Yeah. Yes, they are. Yeah, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the taxpayers, the people who are paying for the funding for the schools in their communities, literally could have this in place if they don't stand up and say no, don't do this and really fight for it. This could happen, and they could be paying for this injustice to be taking place. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very, very true. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Wow.
Good point.
Okay.
That's
Listen, y'all.
why it's so important that your voice are heard on these two bills. Like, I can't stress it enough. We got to, like, so House Bill 322, House Bill 327 received a hearing, and it was about 7 or 8 in a proponent for the bill. I have not seen them, and again, it's in the House State and Local Government Committee. So check out the state and local government, same process, right? Go type in House Bill 327, click on the committee, find a ranking member, make sure that if you are interested in sharing your personal narrative as to why this bill is the wrong direction for Ohio, make sure you're talking to the ranking member and let them know that you're interested in testifying. So, because we need to pack out the state house, right, to share why, House Bill 322 and 327, is the wrong direction. And it is a situation where if we don't, then in many cases, there are going to be folks who say, well, see, no one really, they believed us because no one really showed up. Right. And so yeah, your tax dollars is paying for education, at least the public education and charter school education. And the reality is you want to make sure that you have a say in what your family, your children are being taught. Right. And so if you want them to be taught the truth and you want them to be thoughtful and investigative in terms of what's happening in the world around them, then you have a say so in these matters in these particular two bills. And so I think it's vitally important that you show up. I also think that you get your school board involved, right? Your school board should say something about this bill, right? If they don't believe the school, if this is the, if this is we're going in the wrong direction with House Bill 322, then they need to put out a piece about why it's not, one, we don't teach critical race theory, but then two, these bills is an overreach because we should be
Right.
teaching our students about current events in the world that's happening around them.
Yep.
Environmental justice, for example, right? Under this bill, if you're teaching about, some of the global warming that is real based upon science, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
controversial topic because there are people who don't believe in global warming, then that means that this
Mm-hmm.
bill would limit students from ever learning about global warming. I don't know about you, but I want my child to learn about global warming and what's happening in the environment,
Absolutely.
especially
Yep.
the environment that they're inhabiting. And so you need
Yes,
to make sure
exactly.
that's your school districts, wherever you are, whether it's Columbus, whether it is Reynoldsburg, wherever you are, if you believe that this is something that your school board should get involved with, you need to talk to your school board members, make sure that their voices are part of this process, make sure that they're speaking for you because they're the ones who are going to be impacted just as well on these two
Mm.
bills. And so it's not just the legislature, it's our local government as well. Particular school board members, they have to show up, show out, and if they are against the bill, they should be voicing their concerns, not just with you as a parent or as a student, but also with the government itself.
Yep, absolutely. And that leads into this question that was asked: has a rep for the Department of Ed made any comments? And I don't know if you've seen anything or not yet.
I have not, no.
Not yet. Okay,
No.
he has not seen any. And then there's a question: what are the dates to speak? So for those interested in speaking against or for a proponent
Yeah.
or opponent of the bill.
So every bill is assigned a date, and so
Mm-hmm.
our legislature is on recess right now
Mm-hmm.
until about September. And so right now, what I think the best thing for you to do is to contact the ranking member for the local, state, and local government committee. Ask that question for, I would like to be put on a list for when, you all are notifying individuals that these two bills are going to be up for opponent hearings. And then whenever the date is assigned, they should send you a notification letting you know that here's the date, here's the time, and here's where the committee room is. I think between now and September, you should, write out your testimony. If it takes you a long time to write something, get your thoughts on paper, use this time so that when you hear that date, you're immediately ready to send your information in so that you can show up and show out.
Mm.
That's what I would say. I think it's truly important that you reach out to them, make sure you're on that list so you get the information for when that date is scheduled. And in the meantime, make sure you put together a compelling reason in your testimony so that you can really share your voice on these two issues.
Outstanding. Outstanding. All right. So listen, with that being said, we are about to wrap up, but we're going to wrap up in our normal manner. Dontavius, I can't thank you enough for taking the time
Yeah.
to address these two critically important issues, but then also just to educate us on how we can be better residents, right? And citizens that are active from a civic perspective. And this is one of the cool things about this. I always say I love doing this because I always learn so much from every individual we bring on the show. And now we've created a digital footprint. So for everybody who's watching this, right? There's people who watch this show right now. There's people who are going to watch this tonight, tomorrow, next week, next month, a year, 10 years from now. What I want you all to do is I want you to hit the share button, right? Because I guarantee you, you learned something new today. And I guarantee you, if you hit the share button, you're going to help to educate somebody else. It doesn't, we can't do anything individually. We have to come together and be unified, and we have to be educated on what steps to take. That education just took place. Clear as day, as simple as it could be. This is what we need to do to be engaged and really fulfill our civic responsibility. So, with that being said, I'm gonna open it up to you for any last minute thoughts that you may have. If there's anything before you came on, you said, I want to make sure I talk about this, and then we didn't, this is when I want you to drop it. So later on, you'll say, I can't believe I didn't talk about that.
I try to leave everything on the table. But I really want to say thank you, Kevin, and ColumbusBlack.com for and Amplify Action, for
Amplify Ohio. Amplify Ohio. That's it.
Amplify Ohio. Thank you for correcting.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. For creating this space. Again, I try to do this. I send out legislative briefings every month, and I try to be very intentional and transparent with people about the legislative process, because we typically aren't taught state government in school, right? You learn about the president, you learn about Congress, you learn about the governor, you learn about mayor, city council. But when it comes to state house, state legislatures, it is almost a mystical space. In fact, I always ask young people, who live 3, 4, 5 miles from the state house right up the street, have they ever been in the state house? And the answer overwhelmingly is no. And so how can you be something that you've never walked into? How can you think about what your power is if no one's ever showed you, right? And I take that type of, I see it as urgency that I do everything I can in the time that I have in this space to uplift all people, because a better Ohio starts with all of us. And that is what I will say, that you are more than enough to be in these rooms, to speak your voice, to speak out, to uplift your story, because it is the most powerful weapon we have to changing policy. And I've seen it time and time again when it's happened for bad, and I've seen it also when it's happened for good. And I want to see us do more good for our families, because we are enough, and we need to make sure that we're building a better Ohio for all of us. And so I want to say thank you so much for watching, for folks who are tuning in. I'm always going to be an advocate and resource for you. Please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm here for you every step of the way. I'm on Facebook. You contact my office. We can set up a meeting. Anything you need, because I'm all about uplifting voices and making sure we're doing everything we can to build our communities up. So,
outstanding. And speaking of that, because you invited us all right into the house to play our role, there was a question from the Ubuntu, right? So our youth males, I mentioned this earlier. So we have Ubuntu, which is our young males, high school, 9th through 12th grade, and we have our Nina Imani, which is our young women, 9th to 12th grade, 2 Summer Leadership Institute programs that are with us this evening. And the question was, can our young people speak and share testimony? So is there an age range or group? Yep, go ahead.
You can, we've had 7-year-olds give testimony in front of committee. And I'll tell you, because there's so many of the individuals who come are much older, when the young person comes in and shares their story or speaks out for or against a bill, those legislators listen, because you all are the future. As young people, you are inheriting this space around us, and we'll be here longer than us, even on this call, you and I, Kevin. And so they listen. And I think it's so important that we get young people involved early, because I'll tell you, once you're in that space and you look around and you look at all the people sitting there, you can begin to visualize yourself being a legislator. And that's the power that I believe being in that space has, and opening the doors of opportunity for you. So please come share your story, share your testimony. And look, if we're not doing a good job, run for office, right? When you get older,
there you go.
You're 18, right? Start mobilizing people, start mobilizing your peers, to share where you believe a better Ohio, what direction Ohio should be going for you and your family. So that's what I'll say. Yes, you can. Absolutely.
Outstanding. We're going to wrap it up on that note of what he just said. Yes, you can. All right. So let's go do it on that note. It looks like you got a fan or two out there in the chat as well. So happy to see you today. So listen, y'all, this is what we're going to do. We're going to wrap up. Thank you all for joining us on ColumbusBlack.com. We are live on both Facebook and on YouTube. You can share the link with your friends, your family members. with your youth. Make sure that they see and they hear and they understand this as well. And then how about let's get engaged and let's go out and make sure our voices are heard. I'm already thinking about a couple of ways that we can do that and how we can leverage our platform, especially not just ColumbusBlack.com, but Amplify Ohio and our partnership and collaboration with Black Girl and CLE as well as Buckeye Flame, and pull it all together to make sure our voices are heard. So with that being said, listen, y'all, I want to thank y'all for joining us. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, you name it, we are there. And don't forget to go to the website and make sure you subscribe so that you can get our email newsletter and never miss out on opportunities like this. Because these type of gems, when they're dropped, you don't want to miss them. And on that note, we're going to wrap up as I always do. Guess what, y'all? In order to be more successful in your future, you need to understand a little bit more about your past. That's the reason why we just had Dontavius Jarrells with us. We learned a lot and we had a blast. And on that note, I'm out. Have a good one, everybody. Take care and be safe, and make sure that you weigh in. Stay engaged. Bye-bye.